Humanitarian crisis in Gaza. The Palestinian Red Crescent tells NBC News 10 trucks from the Egyptian Red Crescent have entered Gaza through the Rafah crossing, bringing food and medical supplies. The aid comes as phone and internet service is returning in the Gaza Strip. But hospitals continue to be overwhelmed after healthcare workers and patients spent last night in the dark due to electrical blackouts. Joining me now, Steve Sosebee, founder of Palestine Children's Relief Fund. Thank you very much, Mr. Sosebee, for being here. With phone and internet services being restored, what's the latest you're hearing from aid workers in Gaza this morning?
I have to warn my viewers that before this comes on, that some of the things that are going to be seen and shown and heard here could be very, very shocking, especially to people that's never had to go through anything like this before. But I also want to emphasize upon what we're witnessing here in reality. To give you an illustration, and I'm not saying that compromises should not be made, especially whenever it comes to the lives of the innocent, because that's where basically your war crimes come in drawing divisions or lines and trying to execute the citizens as much as you are the government or the military that's in power that cause this type of trouble. Whenever you're dealing with a unimaginable situation over there, with everybody being on top of one another and them actually building military government facilities under tunnels, not just underground, but under certain strategic areas over in Gaza, pertaining to them putting like a military base up underneath a hospital or putting up underneath a nursing home or whatever. Whenever it comes to rooting out the problem, it's almost a complete, total, impossible situation to even famine, much less deal with. Because TV has become part of our world in the 20th century, now in the 21st century, so predominant, which I believe is part of the prophecies where it says, those who have not known the depths of Satan, hold fast till I come. Believe it or not, there's still a lot of people out there that has never seen TV. It may be far and few between. Believe it or not, there's still people out there that's never engaged in the things that you and I have engaged in, pertaining to running water, electricity, automobiles, etc. All these things is man-made driven in the glory of humanity and not in the glory of God. I'm not saying that some of these things can't be used for the glory of God, but by and large, they're made for the glory of humanity. Even during the Civil War, it was a turnoff in so many people over here in America witnessing hands-on military combat events on TV, that it was such of a cry to stop the war, stop the war. That's basically how the war got stopped, was because of trajectory images coming back and people seeing them. Once more, people, especially over here in America, has lived in a bubble, a protected bubble, whenever it comes to the reality of true reality versus a false narrative reality. And you have to go back to the basics, which is, in this particular case, you have to go back to the basis of who struck the first blow. It was not Jerusalem. It was the combatant army that has done this. So what you're fixing to witness right now on this little short deal here, every bit of the fault should fall upon the leadership of that particular government that caused such cruelty to the people over in Jerusalem. War has never been a glorious thing. It never has been, and it never will be a glorious thing unless you're out of your mind, unless you're just a cruel individual person that likes to see gory, bloody guts and people suffering. Ever since the Antichrist, Lucifer, the Luciferian Lucifer in general, pertaining to the body that got kicked out of heaven, there has been a conflict, there has been war that not only broke out in heaven, but now has broke out in various entities here upon to the planet. Right now, this is the 21st century. We are just seeing the beginning phases of what's fixing to happen over in the Middle East, because people, especially the good people, the Christian people, are tired of taking back seat to the wicked demonic people. And I have said this all along using my particular situation right here at 291 Thompson Road, Sharon, Tennessee, zip code 38255. I've said this all along. My brother and I was targeted. We was hunted down by several individuals in this community. They had already done plotted of how that they was going to respond and react to me if I ever come back to this particular area. The severity of it was so intense that it literally caused the death of a 51-year-old man by the name of David Jeffrey Jackson, because he could not handle that type of rejection coming especially from his peers. It's one thing for David to sit on the sidelines and for him to see his brother being punched on and nibbled on and all kinds of stuff that had happened to me, because David and I was as close in contact with one another, probably more so than any other family member that I've ever had and probably ever will have. I can't say that for sure because I haven't finished out my life. But it's one thing to know that your brother or your husband or your wife or your nephew or your niece or whatever continues to have bad luck falling up into their lives because of what you believe in. And it's another thing for you yourself to be going through that type of persecution. The persecution was so severe in my brother's life that he could not handle what he was having to handle. And I really feel so sorry, because it really put me in a very, very uncomfortable, vulnerable spot, to the point that I realized that it was the Heavenly Father that put the anointing and the calling up into my life. That was the reason why that I was being punched at, slapped around, used as a punching bag or a whipping post or somebody's floor mat. And the thing about the Bible never says nowhere in the Bible that God's precious children are supposed to be the devil's floor mat. It never says in the Bible that God's children are supposed to just take it any way that the devil's people want to give it to us. And that's the reason why I continue to say that the courts here in Weakley County let my brother down to the degree that he had a premature death on account of. To where if they would have been more stiff about what that they was doing in Tommy Moore and Judge Pence and Mike Wilson's administration, if they would have been more stiffer in understanding what was going on out here on the same property again and again and again and again and again, times, I guess 1,000 times again, they would have understood that we was being targeted. We was being hunted. We was being victimized. But because those people up there in Dresden, Tennessee, that works in the court system are not in the frame of their right minds, I guess about the only way that I know to put it, to the point of them understanding and comprehending what other people are going through, you have an inadequate law system here in this area. And I'm pretty sure it probably goes on just about in every other county in not only Tennessee, but in every other county here in America. Because why? Because the Christians have taken it on the cheek, and they have been taught through various preachers that the Bible says you're supposed to turn thy cheek and offer thy other. You're supposed to love your enemies. Because of this perverted thinking, this is another depth of deception that Satan has brought upon to humanity, that is part of the depths of Satan that has interfered with God's holy, precious kingdom, not just his kingdom above our heads, but the kingdom that was supposed to have been established down here on the planet. The way that Satan has set this thing up, pertaining to our American laws and our American thinking, we will never truly see the meek inherit the earth. And that's exactly what he wanted to do. He wanted to convince everybody that it was God's fault. It was God's fault that all these horrendous things that continue to keep falling upon the humanity is God's fault, rather than looking at it from a realistical standpoint and saying, well, you know what? There's more than just one supernatural power here now, isn't it? There's more than just one supernatural entity here now, isn't it? And that's the reason why that the planet is being ravaged again and again and again. Now, I heard this morning where they was being lenient over in Europe pertaining to their Green New Deal, because now they're fixing to go through winter, and they have been shaken up because of what another idiot over on the other side of the world's been doing pertaining to President Putin and that particular government. But if you was to take things right now, even though I'm going to say, let's say 75% of the people is aware of what's been going on now over in Russia pertaining to the Ukrainians. And I'm just talking about the people in America right now, the people that's got TVs and because it's been going on now, I guess almost 2 years now. If you was to turn that scenario around to the point that all of a sudden we started seeing the Ukrainians perform actions the same as we are towards what we're seeing with Jerusalem, people's opinions would automatically change, and they would be more favorable in going along with the actions of the Russian government more so than they would with the Ukrainians government. It just shows you how mixed up, deceived the human race is down here. And once more, I have all the empathy and the sympathy for all them innocent lives that's being affected right now. I have more empathy and sympathy for them than probably anybody else on the planet, because I hate to see the sufferings of anything or anybody, including a bug, including a rabbit, including a squirrel, including a bird. But the bottom line is this: war has never been a glorious thing. And we have to look at it realistically. Who swung the first lick? Going back to the very beginning phases of whenever the confrontation started, that war broke out in heaven. The things that you're fixing to witness and see are not things that those people should be having to go through. But at the same token, you must realize the things that their own people are going through are the things that they have brought upon to themselves. I had to get that out, and hopefully whoever watches this or listens to this will be able to comprehend that the way that I've just got through explaining it to you.
In Gaza this morning?
Well, we're hearing that the situation is getting worse every single minute of every single day, and that the casualties are increasing significantly. And that's saying something, considering that already 3,000 children have been killed in the past 3 weeks. And let me just put that in context for American viewers. 3,000 children in Gaza out of a population of 1 million children is the equivalent of 216,000 American children being killed in a 3-week period through bombings and airstrikes and artillery attacks. That's something we as Americans need to be aware of. For organizations like us, like ours, that have been on the ground for over 30 years, trying to provide humanitarian medical care and aid for the people of Gaza, for the children of Gaza, we're facing a unbelievable humanitarian catastrophe, not just in physical structures being destroyed. 40% of all homes in Gaza have been damaged and destroyed and made unlivable with winter coming, but the human toll of over 3,000 children being killed, and many of them still under rubble. Some of them may be alive. Is just beyond the concept of what we as human beings can properly understand. Let's keep in mind also the gas is being cut off. It's running out. It has not come into Gaza, fuel, for over 3 weeks. And that the shipments that are coming in through the Egyptian border that you mentioned are not bringing fuel with them. And hospitals in Gaza run on fuels. They're run on generators. Generators require fuel. That fuel has been running out, and many of the hospitals are closing. And they're not going to be able to provide life-saving surgery, not just for the hundreds of injured children who are on ventilators and need medical care in hospitals as a result of shrapnel injuries and other types of bombing injuries, but what about the hundreds of children who are in incubators, the premature babies who are going to die when their incubators shut down, or the other kids who are requiring other types of medication that require medical services that are not going to be provided because the fuel's running out? This is an absolute humanitarian disaster. And
it is an absolute humanitarian disaster. But that's what Satan, the demonic figure, the Luciferian Lucifer, the Antichrist, that's what he preys upon, to the weakness of the minds of the human race, hoping that out of empathy and sympathy that they'll retrieve, or they'll stop, or they'll go back to allowing for the Christian society to be beat up on. That's where the church world, not just here in America, but the church world all over the world, has failed their own congregations in not standing up, in understanding that we as Christians does not and did not intend to be somebody else's whipping post. And whenever society becomes so rotten and so corrupt that it can no longer comprehend these things, that's whenever God the Father will intervene, and that's whenever great tribulation shall fall upon to the world, just as it talks about in the Bible, towards God coming back in flaming fire, taking vengeance upon them who know not God, and upon them who obey not the gospel, and burning down everything that is burnable upon this planet down to the ground. You think that you're seeing horrors now on this film. You are. But you have not seen horrors whenever God comes back and does this. Whenever he has to intervene because of the nonsense and the hideous deceptions that Satan has been a part of in corrupting the minds of the people that's supposed to be able to know the differences here, then basically you have a doomed society. And that is the trajectory that we're heading towards. Like I said this morning, I was listening to some other broadcast news pertaining to the markets, and they was leaning more towards the oil markets being stronger now than what they ever have been, because of Europe over there being more leniency on not promoting the Green New Deal versus continually burning with coal and oil and etc. We have been caught, okay? I'm going to use this for an illustration. Humanity has been caught with its pants down pertaining to doing something to the planet that they should have been aware of 30, 40, 50 years ago. And some individuals was, like Carter, the science community went to the White House and told President Carter what was going to be the effects of this. And that administration said, well, get back with us whenever you start to see these things approaching or arising. Get back with us then. The thing about the planet and what we're doing to the planet, it's not like a light switch. Once more, this is another misconception that we have been drove off into in thinking, well, we can make up for lost time. We can crawfish. We can turn it off just like a light switch. You cannot turn off the damages that we have already did to the planet. This is the reason why I continue to tell people, no, I do not think that we can stop what we have already put in motion, the trajectory that the planet is on. I do think that we could slow it down, but I do not think that we can stop it. You know why? Because we have already gotten a taste of the good old American way, pretending to driving around in our nice vehicles, wearing our sunglasses on Sunday with our tops down, looking cool, and thinking that this was part of the world's plan. I got news for you. This is part of the devil's plan in driving the world off into a state of total chaos as far as the humanity race basically self-destructing itself. This is all part of the Lucifer's plan and how that he was going to deal with society. And basically, Lucifer knows that he don't have the power of God to be able to come down in flaming fire like God, like it says that God will possibly do or can do or will do. He don't have that type of authority or that type of power to actually end civilization as we know it on those terms. But what he can do is trick humanity in basically destroying themselves. And that's exactly what he has done. And until we wake up to the power plays that has been played upon to humanity pertaining to the human race, we are never going to be able to sensibly understand these things, much less be able to go up against these things. And once more, I am totally against any type of controversy. I'm totally against war. I'm totally against any type of fight. I'm totally against people not behaving in a radical, sensible, civilized way. And I feel so sorry for the lives of the innocent. But where people are being misled, and I can understand the reason why that you have all these schools and colleges and universities and all these people that's protesting, not just here in America, but all over the world, saying the hell with the Jews, the hell with the Jews, gas the Jews, gas the Jews. I can understand the reason why that they're saying that. And the reason why is because they're deceived. We have put up with this evil demonic being for all this time. And nobody has brought him out into the open in exposing him for what he truly is. And even to this day, right here in Northwest Tennessee, where I live, as far as I'm concerned, I'm still being persecuted for telling the truth. I'm still being persecuted for being honest with the people and telling them the truth about all these matters. I don't have people coming up here stopping and talking to me wanting to support the Windmill Ministries missions. I don't have what you'd call converts. If I do, they're silent converts. If I do, they're more of a metaphor type convert because they talk about peace. And I'm sure deep down in their hearts, they probably would love to see all this stuff go away. But it's not going to go away. And the reason why is because God is going to put an end to it. And the only way that we're going to see true agape peace is that we have to understand, first of all, who the enemy is. And the trickery and the tools and the manipulation coming from the enemy. I can't believe that people aren't standing up. The Christian society here in America ain't standing up against all these demonic occultist leaders coming right here within about a day or two of celebrating their October the 31st Devil's Celebration Day. But are they? Do we see long lines of people protesting against the Wiccans? Do we see long lines of people that's teaching and preaching in some other religion other than the name of Jesus Christ? No, we don't. You know why? Because we have been taught that that's incorrect and it's not proper. Well, that's the reason why that they hated Jesus whenever Jesus was walking around, is because Jesus would put them in their place. And he would tell the Pharisees and the Philistines that they was nothing more than dogs, or that they was serpents, or that they was this, or that they was that. They was hypocrites. He would put them in their place. And they did not like that. They did not like that then, and they don't like that today. Whenever you tell these groups of people that what you're doing to the Christians is wrong, they don't like to hear that. And then whenever something like this explodes on national TV worldwide, the next thing you know, you'll have all these people that'll be motivated towards standing up for the devil versus standing up for God. Why? Because they have been deceived.
Humanitarian disaster, and aid organizations like ours don't have the resources at this moment to support the response, the humanitarian response, because we're not able to get aid in, because aid is being controlled at the Egyptian border, and it's just a trickle. It's less than 3% of what the people in Gaza currently need to survive. And it's not just fuel, it's food, it's water, it's shelter, it's sanitation supplies, it's medication. They're running out of pain medications, they're running out of anesthesia supplies, they're running out of basic medical instruments that enable them to treat injured children. It's something that we have to be on top of and trying to...
It's inconceivable for most Americans to comprehend this. It's inconceivable to them. And the reason why it's inconceivable to them is because, once more, they have been blinded, and they're looking at something towards it being horrible, in which it is. But rather than them going to the perpetrators of pointing the blame towards the actual perpetrators that started all this, they always go to the opposite form. They always go to the other side. Even Christ talked about the false prophets. Woe be unto them that all people speak well of. Woe be unto them whenever everybody talks in their behalf and on their behalf. For so did they to the false prophets and the false teachers before them. It's the people that are in the grassy row. It's the people that are talking about the truth and trying to open the eyes of other people about the truth. Those are the people that get beat up on. Those are the people that get snarled at. Those are the people that get whirling accusations thrown at them. Those are the people that usually becomes a victim themselves because they are speaking the truth. That's what happened whenever I come back in 2014 and my brother David was caught up in the middle. That's the reason why I look at this from a war perspective, that David was collateral damage pertaining to the spiritual war that was motivating people of coming out here almost sometimes 4, 5, 6 times a day, agitating and aggravating and punching and basically provoking us, that we knew because of the laws of the land, if we took the law into our own hands, that in and of itself, we would be shooting ourselves in the head. Much less shooting ourselves in the foot. We had to put up with this because the courts was allowing for this. And to this day, I still have to meet them people either on the road or on aisle 3 in the middle of Walmart. Do I cuss at them? No. Do I fuss at them? No. Matter of fact, I try to greet them just as honorably as anybody else would want to greet somebody, even though I know who they are. And I know that they know who I am. But in order to be civilized in the civilization that Christ intended for us to be, and because of the laws here up into the land, I have no other choice other than to be kind and polite to the very people that helped put my brother to an early death. And I'll say that regardless whether I meet Tommy Moore on aisle 3 or Judge Pence at a big hop-a-baloo thing that's going on up here in Martin, Tennessee. I got to meet these people, smile at them, and greet them just like I would a complete total stranger, even though I know their performances in what that they didn't do allowed for my brother to die a premature death. Now, if that's not turning your cheek, I don't know what is. I'm still here in the community. I'm still offering my assistance and my help, and I'm still not getting no type of support team, no type of congregation. So as far as I am concerned, whatever happens on whatever level, it's the fault falls upon the feet of the older generations, the baby boomers, the adults, especially the professionals, that they should have had enough abilities to understand the teachings that I was putting out there was in fact authentic, but because they was looking at the bad side of it versus the good side of it, it has now led us all down this road of doom and gloom towards a nation being $30-something trillion in debt, all the drugs, all the illegal aliens, all the gun violence. I mean, we just got through witnessing another horrible event with somebody with an assault military style piece of equipment that basically went in and just absolutely butchered a bunch of innocent people. And these people don't have enough sense to change their laws or conform their laws. Whenever I talk about monsters, whenever I talk about me having to deal with monsters, I'm not just speaking metaphorically about these people being monsters. And it's one thing to deal with somebody that's cruel and indifferent, and it's another thing to deal with people that's cruel and indifferent and don't even realize that they are cruel and indifferent. You reach another level with monsters that want to convince themselves, being full of themselves, holier than thou, off of their own self-righteousness, and thinking that what they're either done or what they're not doing or what they are doing is all of the understandings of godliness. It's really, it upsets me, and I'm glad that I got to be able to make videos like this to be able to express my feelings to others, and hopefully, hopefully, and that's all I can do at this point in time in making these videos. Hopefully, people will awaken before it is too late. Because I promise you, this is not a casual promise. I promise you, this is a literal promise, that if we continue on the road that we're on, in the trajectory that the human race is going down right now, it's just a matter of time before God gets ready to say, enough is enough. He'll throw the towel in, and he'll treat this civilization the same way as he treated the civilization during the era of Noah. And if you don't believe me, hang around a little longer and keep your hands underneath your hips and remain quiet about all this, and you will see what's fixing to come down the pike.
Respond to it in an urgent manner, because the lives of innocent children are at stake here.
Mr. Sosebee, what are, in the less than a minute we have left, what are organizations doing to cope with not just the fuel shortage that you were just talking about, but all the other shortages you mentioned, from food to medications to other things?
We're in the process of procuring millions of dollars worth of material in Egypt and outside to bring into Gaza as soon as the border is open and as soon as we're able to get aid in. And we also are working to get injured children and sick children who need medical care they can't get out of Gaza for treatment outside because they're not able to get adequate treatment locally. Also to bring food, water, not only medical supplies and medical equipment, which our medical teams from abroad are providing us clear direction as to what's needed to ensure that we're using our money in the most effective way. But also we have 2 doctors that are stuck in Gaza that have been there for 3 weeks. We need help from our U.S. government to get them out. They've been at the border with many other internationals. Their lives are in danger. Food is running out. Water is running out. The situation is completely deteriorating on a regular basis and on a daily basis, and we really, really need the international community come up and put an end to this. Let's have a ceasefire. Let's have a humanitarian pause, whatever you want to call it. Let's get aid to these people, to these children, before it gets much worse and many more of them needlessly die.
Steve Sosebee of the Palestine Children's Relief Fund, thank you very much for coming to the program.
You're welcome.
And that will do it for me today. Thank you for watching The Sunday Show. I'll be back next Saturday and Sunday starting an hour early at 8 a.m. Eastern. And remember to follow us on X, platform formerly known as Twitter.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable.
To do so.
Is that going to be your message to Saudi Arabia's defense minister when you meet tomorrow? I know you know a number of Arab partners are concerned about the level of violence in Gaza right now.
We've been talking to our Arab partners, including to Saudi Arabia, about the unfolding crisis in Gaza. We listen to them carefully. We share our perspective. And yes, we will have the opportunity to dive deep, not just on what is happening today, but on what tomorrow could bring. Because what President Biden said in the Rose Garden this past week was that we can't go back to October 6th. That means Hamas can no longer terrorize Israel, but it also means that there needs to be a political horizon for the Palestinian people. 2 states for 2 peoples, the right of Palestinians to live in safety, dignity, and equality. And we're going to work towards that. And Arab states, including Saudi Arabia, have a role and a responsibility in that as well.
Before I let you go, do you now believe Iran is deterred?
Well, what I believe is that the United States will follow through on what we say we're going to do. We said that if our troops were attacked, we would respond. We responded. If they're attacked again, we will respond again. And we are vigilant because we are seeing elevated threats against our forces throughout the region and an elevated risk of this conflict spreading to other parts of the region. We are doing everything in our power to deter and prevent that, but I'm not going to predict what the future brings other than to say that if we are attacked, we will respond.
Jake Sullivan.
And once more, we have all the right to respond, even though we are classified as a Christian nation. Just like Jerusalem has all the right in the world to respond, even though they are a Christian nation. Just because you are a Christian person does not mean that you are supposed to be somebody's devilish whipping post or be violated again and again and again. And whenever our courts allow for that to happen to their citizens, then our courts is no longer operating the way that they're supposed to be operating. And that's exactly what the courts done in Dresden, Tennessee during the 3-year period that David and I was putting out every kind of symbol, every kind of SOS you could think of. Help, 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 help. I even put signs out here talking about rebuking what was going on, and still did not get good, honest, professional help. If the type of help that I got was when my brother died, and less than about 10 days later, then they wanted to stick me with the charges that they should have been sticking this half of this community down here with. If that's the type of help that you get from the courts, those people can go straight to hell. And probably already are going straight to hell because they do not have compassion feelings for the Christian society, not the true Christian society. And they know good and well that every piece of material that I put out there for the past 30 plus years has been in the honor of the Lord Jesus Christ, not in the honor of some sort of other fictitious belief, or not in the honor of the Wiccans, or not in the honor of the Luciferian Lucifer. Every piece of material that I can prove has been put out in the honor of the Heavenly Father and His Son, Jesus Christ. And for them to have set back and allowed for that to have happened is a disgrace to our American laws, much less a disgrace to the Christian society. And they know that I know this. And they know that I can prove this, but still I can't motivate them. I can't rally the people. So once more, whatever befallens upon to this people, pertaining to the adults, pertaining to the baby boomers and etc., the so-called Christians, whatever happens to them, as far as I'm concerned, they have brought this upon to themselves. And they will stand in judgment one day for allowing for this to fester and to get out of shape the way that it is, beginning at the church world, beginning at the church communities, especially those that profess to be Christians and have basically turned their hearts, are given the messenger such of a hard time, or given the messenger such of a cold shoulder. And it's one thing for people not to want to support the Windmill Ministries missions. They have all the right in the world in not supporting me. But don't attack me. Don't violate my rights. And that's exactly what the courts was allowing to do. Even under the pretense of David and I feeling so emotionally grieved and stricken about 3 little children across the road, and now all of a sudden I'm a stalker because I have feelings about 3 little children across the road. Well, you know what? If that type of feeling is what costed me a felony, please do not hesitate to give me more felonies, because I am a Christian and I am concerned about the innocent lives of little children, regardless whether they be across the road or regardless whether they be across the pond. I am concerned about the lives of the innocent. And whenever we, especially our professional members of our laws here in America, whenever we can no longer have the same feelings of that, then we're in trouble. And you wonder how come our streets has become so bloody? You wonder how come the drugs has inundated our communities? You wonder how come we have a nation now that's $30-something trillion in debt? Stop wondering and start being responsible. There's consequences in not doing the proper right thing. And I think the people over in Jerusalem, no, I don't think, I know they do. They know that if they continue to turn the cheek and let it fester, it's just a matter of time before they're going to have to deal with this same problem again and again and again. And it's time to put an end to it, and that's probably the reason why that they are being so dead set in doing what they're doing right now. Is it pleasurable? No, it's not pleasurable. Is it something that they want to do? No, it's not something that I feel like that they want to do. It's something that they feel like that they have to do. There's a difference between doing stuff just for giggles, just for entertainment purposes, and doing stuff because this is the only last alternative, which is basically to go into a fight. And that's what they done up in heaven. They went into a fight. And they kicked the bad out. They kicked the bad out. And now, the bad is now doing what they're doing to us down here. And obviously, either we don't care or don't have enough sense to care, or are incapable of caring in the aspect of what I'm talking about.
Jake Sullivan, thank you for your time. And Face the Nation will be back in 1 minute. Stay with us. We go now to General Joseph Votel, former CENTCOM commander overseeing operations in the Middle East. General, it's good to have you with us. I want to pick up where we left off with the National Security Advisor. He said the U.S. has elevated threats against U.S. forces, elevated risk of the conflict spreading. What are the trigger points you are concerned about?
Thanks. Good morning, Margaret. It's good to be with you. So I think the thing that I've been concerned about, and probably many have been concerned about, is that any miscalculation along the line can move this to a different level. So, an attack on an American installation, whether it's military or diplomatic or commercial, that causes casualties, significant casualties, and death, I think could significantly change the calculus for us. And certainly a much broader attack by the so-called Iranian threat network here, whether it's Hezbollah or whether it's Iranian aligned militia groups in Syria, to broaden the conflict. I think these are all aspects that could lead to a widening of the conflict.
There have already been 20.
And that's the reason why Christ said in his teachings that whenever you shall see Jerusalem accomplished with armies, to know that the desolation is nigh. Whenever you shall see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet, know that the desolation is nigh. The word nigh means at hand.
There have already been 20 militia attacks on U.S. forces in Syria and Iraq. There are about 19 service people who suffered from traumatic brain injuries. One contractor died. How do you understand that level of aggression?
Well, it's very clear. I mean, Iran is behind this. There are elements in Iraq and to some extent in Syria are perpetrating these attacks. And as the National Security Advisor said, we've got to hold them accountable for that. And so it is critically important to not just be responsive, but to be directly responsive, to be forceful in our manner. Ultimately, what we need to do is compel these elements and Iran, who is behind all of this, to stop this type of action right now.
In Israel, their prime minister said yesterday this is going to be a long war, and we're in the second phase. You just heard Jake Sullivan say the U.S. is still asking questions like, what exactly are the objectives? How do you describe what the IDF is doing right now in Gaza?
Well, I think what the IDF is doing is, I think that the task they've probably been given is to destroy the war-making capacity of Hamas. So they are going after command and control locations, they're going after logistics locations, they're going after headquarters locations, and they're going after the likely sites that Hamas would use to perpetrate missile strikes or rocket strikes onto Israel. So from my perspective, it's pretty clear what the Israeli military is doing. I think their job is to destroy that war-making capacity of Hamas.
Should they stop once capturing Gaza City?
Well, again, I think they'll have to make an assessment of their progress. Most of the effort now seems to be in the northern part of Gaza and around Gaza City, which I think as most people who study this will recognize are the primary areas where Hamas operates. So they definitely directed their operations against the places where Hamas is, and I think they're actually approaching this in an incremental manner. I think we've seen introduction of additional forces over the last couple of days, so they're thinking about it that way. Mm-hmm. And of course, like any military force would do, they have to take assessments of their progress as they continue with their operations.
There is concern about another front here outside of Gaza, and I know on Wednesday, President Biden said he is alarmed by, quote, extremist settlers attacking Palestinians in the West Bank in, quote, places they're entitled to be. One of Israel's government ministers, Ben-Gvir, has video of him arming Israeli civilians with M16 and M4 assault rifles. How concerned are you about an uptick in violence in the West Bank?
Well, again, I think this goes back to what we just talked about a few moments ago. That's the miscalculations. I mean, this it's a tinderbox, and so when you have people that are scared, they have weapons, they're trying to protect themselves, then the chances for something going wrong in this, I think, increase. So yeah, and the rhetoric has been very strong about this, about the vulnerability and the fact that that Israeli settlers in the West Bank are targets. I mean, that's essentially what these Islamic movements have been saying. So I think it's an ordinary critical situation. It could flow out very quickly.
General Votel, thank you for your analysis today.
Thank you.
And we'll be right back, so stay with us.
It's unbelievable. And what is occurring that people don't understand. I'm gonna try to make it more of a clear gesture here. The military ordinarily always looks at the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. And whenever you're caught up in a situation like this, as being a good leader in protecting your people, especially if you've tried every strategy beyond this strategy, then there comes a time that you have to make a choice between the lesser of the two evils. And would it be more eviler to let it fester even further in knowing what you're dealing with is just going to come back and haunt you again? Or should you just go ahead and plow into it and try to overcome it or prove to it that you're not going to have to take such as this and that you are going to stand up to these evildoers? That's what's happened here. And that's exactly what happened to the Heavenly Father and the Lord Jesus Christ whenever the devil done what the devil done up in heaven. Do you really think that God and God's precious angels and all the rest of God's kingdom, do you really think that they wanted war in heaven? They didn't want war in heaven. They didn't want confusion. They didn't want a controversy up there. They didn't want a commotion. But they was forced into the decision of defending themselves. And because they was forced into that decision, they had to show their bad side. They had to prove to the rest of the conflicting spirits that we're not going to put up with that, and they kicked their asses out. Once more, who swung the first lick? The way that the Bible teaches, it was Lucifer. And at one time, Lucifer used to stand beside Gabriel and some of the most beautifulest angels in heaven, but he wasn't content in that. He wanted to rule. He wanted to be dominant over even the Creator. And that's whenever the Creator was provoked in showing his bad side. Same thing right here. There ain't no telling how many people right now in American prisons, in American jails, that have been provoked in them basically having to take the law into their own hands, and now they're paying for it as far as being imprisoned the rest of their lives because it was some demon that was provoking them, and they gave into the bait, hook, line, and sinker, and now they have shot themselves in the foot, and now they're basically, by shooting themselves in the foot, they basically shot themselves in the head, and now they're basically doomed. That's exactly what the scenario was supposed to have played out here at 291 Thompson Road, Sharon, Tennessee, zip code 38255. It just so happens my brother and I was smarter than that. We knowed what was happening. We could look through what was happening, even way before even all this occurred, because of so much of it occurring in my particular life of every time that I would stand up with the message, different people, and it was usually Christians that was standing up against the message, with me being the messenger. So all these people that have done this, or that have standed back and allowed for this to occur, or was entertained by it, these are the people that I continue to keep telling you that one day in the great judgment they will give an account for what that they have either done or what that they did not do, that they knowed to do, that they didn't do. And if you can't understand that any better than that, then I are basically talking, I would basically have better comments talking to a tree somewhere if you can't comprehend that. And it may be because people are just incapable of comprehending that. I don't know. I'm pretty sure that's the way that they're going to lean. They're going to lean towards, oh, we're just going to plea out on the insanity plea. We just didn't know. Oh, yeah, you knew. You knew exactly what was going on and why it was going on and who was motivating the reason for it happening. You knew. You can plead insanity all you want, but you knew. And that's exactly what the devil's going to do in his final days. After that 1,000-year millennium, whenever God finally captures him and great fire comes down from heaven and consumes all of them that followed after this demonic figure again, Satan's going to holler, oh, I didn't know, I didn't know. In other words, the Luciferian Lucifer is going to plea out on, or try to plea out on, insanity plea. Or he's going to say, well, you entrapped me, God. No, nobody entrapped Lucifer. And Lucifer was very, very capable of understanding his actions before he ever committed them. And if you can't understand that, either you're siding with the devil because you are of the devil's people, or maybe I'm talking to people that can't comprehend that because they're incapable of comprehending that. But either or, because of people like me that does bring it to your awareness of the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help us God, now you no longer have that excuse. You no longer have the excuse of standing underneath the shadows of saying, well, I'm just going to plead insanity here. I'm just going to plea out and act like that I didn't know nothing. Or that I wasn't capable of understanding. Oh, yeah, you understand. You know exactly what's happened here in the past 30 plus years to the messenger that had the message that didn't nobody want to support. And now it has led us down this road of where we are today as Americans.
Is back in business. Our Scott McFarland takes a closer look at the new Speaker, Louisiana's Mike Johnson.
Thrust from obscurity and the backbench of the U.S. House in just his fourth term.
Let the enemies of freedom around the world hear us loud and clear.
Now we're supposed to, listen to me carefully, as viewers, we're supposed to take all that nonsense that happened for about a 3-week period of debating, using up all that time, all that free camera time, then people basically getting on TV and basically just showing her you know what. We're supposed to take all that now and put it to the side and act like none of it happened. And now we're only supposed to focus on the fact that, oh, the American government finally got its act together. Oh, we need to concentrate now on what's happening here pertaining to the good side versus the ugly side. Whenever Donald Trump talks very, very thoroughly about how the swamp needs to be drained and how the corruption has grown into more corruption in our great land pertaining to basically our own government has become actually they went beyond extortionist. It's almost like a crime syndicate in how that they do and how that they try to manipulate people and how that they reward the guilty. They reward the guilty but punish the innocent. And whenever they say that you're supposed to be innocent until proven guilty, you can just about throw that out the door on a local level on just about any case. Because if you've been charged with something, you're automatically looked upon by the rest of society as being guilty. And it doesn't matter if it's a big charge or a little charge. I'm just telling you, by and large, over here in the Western world, in America, or it is in this particular area anyway, that if you get charged for something, well, he must be guilty of it or he never would have been charged of it. That's how naive that the Christian society has become over here. Not understanding the works of the devil. Not understanding that Jesus said that they would come in sheep's clothing, but inwardly would be wolves inside. We have been taken to the cleaners. The American people have not gotten the bang for the buck. And until the younger generation steps up and says, we understand what you're talking about, Mr. Jackson. We support your endeavors, Mr. Jackson. Until I see that, I'm going to continue to believe that we are on a road of doom and gloom. That we are on this trajectory that I guarantee you the Luciferian Lucifer is the one that put us on. And to think that the core of origin began right here in Northwest Tennessee, beginning 30 plus years ago, whenever 9 tapes went to the White House during Ronald Reagan's administration, and what kind of, I hate to use the word asses, that they have proven themselves in being, and still to this day, they're still not willing to conform. They're still not willing to admit to their wrongs. It speaks volumes about that group of people and how sorry and rotten and worthless that they truly are. Now, the people that hear this, that are those people that's guilty of the things that I'm talking about, they're just going to bitter up and they're just going to hate me that much more. They done the same thing to Jesus Christ whenever Jesus Christ would look at them and call them scorpions or dogs or call them hypocrites. They hated Jesus. They hated him with every ounce of energy within their very being. And they took that hate all the way to their graves. Just like I'm sure there's people right here within arm's throwing distance that's going to take the hate and the bitterness that they have against Juby, being an anti-Juby activist, and been an anti-Juby activist all these years. They're going to take that hate to their graves. Well, you know what? That's your doings. That ain't mine. You've had the opportunity of repenting and changing your ways, and I still don't see any repentance, and I for darn sure haven't seen any change of ways. So, you know what? Let whatever happens, happens. Now, is this what I want to see? No. No, I wanted to see a revival. I wanted to see peace and utopia. I wanted to see everybody get along. I wanted to see love. But because certain people didn't respond certain ways, now we're all paying the consequences for. And hopefully those people over in the Pakistanians over there, that's part of that 2-sector group over there, hopefully that they'll come around in understanding, hey, it's my own leadership that has brought this kind of condemnation upon to our own heads. Hopefully the people over in Russia, after things get so harsh over there with their food and going through boycotts and everything else, hopefully their own people will say, you know what, it's our leadership, it's our government that has caused this to happen to all of our lives. It's not the Ukrainians' fault. It's not the Western world's fault. It's not the UN's fault. It's not some other people's fault. It's our own people that has brought this condemnation into our own lives. And until we, the people, regardless whether it be American people, Jerusalem people, Pakistani people, Russian people, China people, or any other kind of people, until they're willing to understand that and recognize that and then act upon that, we're only going to senseless go down this wormhole that is going to lead us to more pain and destruction. And that's exactly what Luciferian Lucifer wants to do while he's sitting back in the corner laughing. Laughing. Because he has brought this type of indignation into our lives. Laughing. You cannot conform the devil. You cannot conform the devil's people. Jesus did not come down here for those that needeth not a physician. He didn't come down here to conform the devil and the devil's people. He come down here to enhance the people that was God's people who had been lost or had been manipulated or who had been deceived, to bring them strength, hope, and encouragement, and to also give them an opportunity of life beyond this life if they would accept his teachings of who he was. Jesus Christ did not come to conform the world. He come to conform certain people within the world. The devil and the devil's people is always going to be the devil and the devil's people, because you know what? Whenever that person dies, you know what's going to happen? The devil and those spirits are going to leave that body, and they're going to go into another body, and then they're going to use that body the same way. And they're going to jump from body to body, from generation to generation, to culture to culture. And that's what they've been doing now since the beginning of time. And if God's people can't understand that and recognize that, then I guess I just as well be talking to a tree. Because I can get just about the same response, if not even a better response, out of the tree. Because you know what? I expect that out of a tree. I expect a tree to be a tree. But the people that I've been putting these messages out to, I've been expecting something else, and I haven't been getting it. So does that mean that I should stop producing these videos? Does that mean I should stop listening to the consequences of people's sufferings and what's going on in the world and what's going on right here in the United States? Oh, they would love for me to. They would love to put a gag on me. They would love to put a piece of tape over my mouth, just like the people up there in Waverly, up there in Humphreys County, because I was telling them that what their actions had done almost costed me my liberties by having a probation officer and her supervisor and a deputy come out here to tell me that if I didn't go get a doctor's approval of being fit to be out in the eyes of the people, that it would be looked upon as being an act of probation violation. So once more, what did old Juby have to do? What did the messenger have to do? Because of some idiot up there in Waverly, Tennessee. Probably with several idiots up there in Waverly, Tennessee, that had that type of power to ring those type of bells. Juby had to find a doctor. And Juby had to get approval from the doctor to say, well, he's fit to be out into the eyes of the public. That releases any type of liability from the judges or anybody else that's associated with the law. What they don't understand is that it's a psychiatric community that has driven us to the point of where we are right now. They thought that they could control these demons with chemicals. And now look what it's gotten us. Not only has the medical professional community failed us, but our political communities have failed us. And as far as I'm concerned, our spiritual churches has also failed us. Because we should not have had to have went down this endless road for people to have awakened. And I don't know to this day that they've still awakened. I mean, whenever you put out as much material as I put out, and you still don't get a response, a positive response, you have to be like me in understanding or seeing things the way that I see it. Well, obviously they must still be convinced that they're right and I'm wrong. Obviously, they must be a doomed classification of people, the same as the classification of people was during the time that God was speaking through Noah, telling them that if they didn't repent, that God was going to destroy that bunch. People's hearts had become hardened. They're stiff-necked. They've put stoppers in their ears. They don't want to hear people like me. That's the reason why that I don't have a big audience pertaining to my social media platform. Like some people can put out something and man, it'll go like wildfire, and the next thing you know, they got millions and millions and millions of people that's wanting to hear the song, or millions of people that want to hear what they have to say, or millions of people that want to watch the funny video. What did Jesus say? Woe be unto them that all people speak well of, for so did they to the false prophets before them. People want to be lied to. People want to be led down the wrong road because they themselves don't want to do the right thing. And I'm going to be quite honest with you, I look up to the leader of Jerusalem right now, because that bunch has finally woken up to the evil that they've been dealing with all along, and they realize, choosing between the lesser of the two evils, they obviously have chosen the wrong choice by allowing for it to fester. Now, it's come time to put it out, even at the expense of seeing such sufferings and such gruesome things that we're now witnessing on TV.
Here, the People's House is back in business.
The congressman from Louisiana's ascent to be second in line to the presidency
Would y'all like to get right into governing?
was so unexpected and so quick, his wife missed the vote.
She's not here. We couldn't get a flight in time. This happened sort of suddenly.
That overnight rise to the most powerful position in Congress
You're going to see this group working like a well-oiled machine.
also prevented the traditional deep dive into his career and his positions before he took the gavel.
People are curious, what does Mike Johnson think about any issue under the sun? I said, well, go pick up a Bible off your shelf and read it. That's my worldview. That's what I believe in.
The evangelical Christian is an attorney specializing in constitutional law, once a talk radio host who has for decades towed a hard line against abortion rights.
What about the brutal violence and the murder that is committed upon the preborn child?
17 years before Roe v. Wade was overturned, he wrote an editorial equating abortion with the Holocaust and a judicial system allowing abortions to Hitler. He's been staunchly against gay rights and has referred to it as inherently unnatural and voted against legalizing same-sex marriage. After the 2020 presidential election, Johnson was an architect of congressional efforts to overturn the results, not only voting to decertify the results, but galvanizing House Republicans to join a lawsuit in Texas to challenge the outcome and espousing a conspiracy theory.
When you have, a software system that is used all around the country that is suspect because it came from Hugo Chavez's Venezuela.
Now that he's Speaker, Johnson has less to say about that.
Johnson, you helped lead the efforts to overturn the 2020 election results. Will you
But if Republicans maintain the majority next November, Johnson would lead the House in the next certification, January 6, 2025. He's been bolstered by the defectors who removed Kevin McCarthy.
The swamp is on the run. MAGA is ascendant. And if you don't think that moving from Kevin McCarthy to MAGA Mike Johnson shows the ascendance of this movement and where the power in the Republican Party truly lies, then you're not paying attention.
And those same defectors are the ones open to shutting down the government if their demands aren't met. The new Speaker now has just 19 days to keep that from happening.
Speaker Johnson said he'd like to split aid for Israel from aid for Ukraine, which puts immediate aid for Ukraine in a fragile position because there are dozens of Republicans who oppose it. Margaret, he'd need a critical mass of Democrats to support it then, and bills with a critical mass of Democratic support is one reason why there's no Speaker Kevin McCarthy anymore.
You know, in the height of an exchange subject last night, I was listening to, I think it was Fox. And man, was they ever going after it pertaining to all these protesters that was against Jerusalem. And the person that they was interviewing or was bringing to the table in question at hand, they asked her a simple question. Well, do you support what happened with 9/11? And did you know that lady that they was talking to hesitated for several seconds before she actually gave an answer, rather than giving the answer immediately, saying, no, I do not support the way that we was attacked on 9/11. It just goes to show you how manipulative that people's minds have become. And whenever it comes to a group of people that's very, very, their attention span is very, very short, and not being able to put all the dots together, my God, have I ever run upon such of a group of people that tell you, well, if you still remember all that, you had never let that go. You still holding those people accountable. Well, yeah. Those people have never come clean. They've never asked for forgiveness. They've never admitted to any of their wrongs. We've never seen a true confession. Why wouldn't I make my stance and continue my stance even to the very last breath? The same as other true Christians have done, especially Jesus Christ. You see, they was wanting Jesus to conform. They was wanting Jesus to basically back up. They was wanting Jesus to lighten up, I guess would be the right word. And Jesus was dead set. He was not going to lighten up. They could whip him, they could beat him, they can bring all the blood that they wanted to. They can put a crown of thorns on him and humiliate him, strip him down to bare naked and hang him on a cross, but he was still not going to give in to what they wanted him to give in. You know why? Because Jesus never looked at the enemy in any other fashion or form other than it being a very, very serious matter. And whenever we, as a Christian society, cannot do the same, then we need to start evaluating ourselves and just exactly who we are and what we stand for. And that's exactly what Jesus was talking about pertaining to the salt. That if the salt had lost its potency, what good is it other than to be trampled down by the foot of man? And Jesus was not going to be trampled down. Oh, they may have trampled him down physically, but they did not trample him down emotionally or spiritually, because he kept his stance all the way to the end, to the very second, to the very moment that he looked up into the heavens and said, Father, it is finished. And he gave up the ghost. Life left his body. Temporarily. But that same life that left his body come back into that body on the third day. Because his words was true. Because his motivations, his whole intent was right on. Uncompromisable. And he proven his point even to the very last breath. And if we, as a true Christian society, aren't willing to do the same, then you need to question whether or not you're truly a born-again Christian. Jesus didn't give in to them. There comes a time that you have to look at things in a different perspective. And I feel like that's what's finally happened to Jerusalem over there, that they have looked at the lesser of the two evils and weighing out the lesser of the two evils. Is it going to be more of an eviler deed by giving in to Hosh, or whatever his name is, Hamish, or over there, towards giving in to their ways? Is it going to be lesser of an evil by giving in, or more of an evil by giving in? Because they know that if they give in, they're just going to have to deal with this again and again and again and again. And that was basically what was happening to us down here at 291 Thompson Road and 430 Beech Grove Road, Sharon, Tennessee, zip code 38255, is that we was hoping that we would have had somebody in our corner, regardless whether it was a judge or a prosecuting attorney, such as Johnson, or Tommy Thomas at the time, that's now retired. But we was hoping that somebody would have been in our corner, and the whole time that we was hoping, we just as well been poo-pooing in one hand and hoping in the other towards seeing which hand was going to fill up the quickest, because we could not get no professional help in the courts of Weakley County. Why? Because they knew that the people in Weakley County was against the messenger because they didn't like the message. Well, so what? I don't like to mow my yard whenever it's 100 degrees outside. But that doesn't mean I'm going to get a John Deere tractor out here with a breaking plow and break it all under and make a mess out of my yard. People have become spoiled in America in thinking that their way is the right way. And I got news for you. Just because you believe that your way is the right way don't mean that it's the right way. You know, the people that strap a suicide vest on their bodies and think that if they go out and blow themselves up, that they're going to be able to live with 99 virgins and drink all the wine that they want. Well, they're very, very humble and sincere in their belief. You got to admit that it takes a very strong, passionate person to do something like that. But just because you believe it doesn't make it right. That's my point about how so many people turned against the messenger of the Windmill Ministries missions because they didn't like what they was hearing. And it wasn't so much in the elegancy of how that the message was being given. It wouldn't have mattered. It would have mattered if I was a Joel Osteen or a Billy Graham. They had made it up in their minds that they was not going to accept this. Okay? Just like Tony Smith, Jerry Smith's son that I work with in Milan, Tennessee. You are not going to cram this down my throat. All right? I walked away from him. Don't cram it down his throat. But now, 20 some odd years later, since I was working for that bunch of people over in Milan, Tennessee, in the body shop, Jerry Smith's body shop, now look what's being crammed down his throat now. All the rapes, all the murders, all the drug overdoses, all the gun violence, all the other things that wasn't going on then that are going on now. So, he had a choice. Okay? That bunch had a choice. Matter of fact, some of them have spread out and working in other body shops, and some of them are still living, but they had a choice. Well, the choice that they made, now look at the consequences and what kind of choice that they made. Once more, they didn't want to support the messenger. Why didn't they want to support the messenger? Because they didn't like the message. They wanted Satan, basically, to take charge and rule over their lives. Okay, well, look what it's gotten them. Now they have to wake up every morning and turn on the news and see where somebody has been raped, violated, where somebody's been shot, mutilated. Now they have to turn on the news and see where we're $30-something trillion in debt. Now they have to turn on the news and understand that all these illegals that's coming over the border illegally is all part of the package in the consequences. But now to get them to believe that and understand that, comprehend that, is another $64,000 question. And there's probably a lot of them that will take it to their graves in believing what they believe, even though they know that what they're believing is a lie. But one day reality will come to them. It will come to them. But at that point in time, it may very well be too late. Because that will be the day that the Heavenly Father will either say, well done, or get thence behind me, for I have never known thee. That will be the saddest day in not only human history, but also in spiritual history, because I promise you, God did not want to go to war with Lucifer and the angels that followed after him. God was provoked into that. And if we can't understand that and identify that, then we need to evaluate who we truly are as putting a label on our coattails and saying, or our patels, and saying that we are born again Christians.
Good point. Scott, thank you. We'll be right back. We'll be right back with a lot more with Ohio Republican Senator J.D. Vance. Stay with us.
Tonight.
Welcome Welcome back to Facebook.
I want to say this. You know, me knowing all the stuff that I knew going back into the early 80s about the Antichrist, the one world government, the New World Order, the two witnesses, the opening of the seven seals, the four horsemen, combining that with the teachings of the unblemished Herfer and the teachings coming out of Daniel. I guess it was about 10 years after I worked for Jerry Smith Body Shop. After 9/11, it was along about 2001, well, it was after 9/11, about a year after 9/11, whenever we wound up leaving Jackson, Tennessee, my wife and I, after we got married the second time, and we moved to a piece of property over in over by Lexington, Tennessee, off of Interstate I-40, off of exit, I think it was 104, the exit before you get to Parker's Crossroad exit. Listening to politics then and watching the ordeal happen with Al Gore of the hanging of the Chads and what had taken place down in Florida pertaining to the Bush becoming president. That was basically a very, very strong eye-opener for me personally of understanding that America's in trouble. We are in big, big trouble whenever it comes to, especially the state of Tennessee, not willing to hold up their own person, their own man, because they wanted to characterize him as him being crazy or him having the wrong interior motives of caring about the environment, of accusing him of being an owl lover or a tree lover or an environmentalist. I knew then, at that point in time, after I'd got married the second time, this was before Miss Jackson decided to walk out of my life in 2005. I knew then, probably along about 2003, 2004, that we as a society, as American society, was in trouble. Especially whenever they voted in, not necessarily a black man. I didn't have no objections to that. But what I did find to be very, very astonishing, why would we have voted in Obama, that had so much resemblance to the very enemy that was supposed to have killed us or killed 3,000 people? Why in the world would we have ever voted him in power to begin with such a name? And that was just branched off the name. That wasn't branched upon anything that I knew about Obama at the time, towards him being a community organizer up in Chicago. But I knew then, especially since the Bushes done what they done, and basically the Republicans stealing the election from the Democrats. And I'm truly, truly, truly convinced of that pertaining to the hanging Chads, because I went down to Florida years later. I investigated to find out if any of that was true, that what we had been witnessing on TV, and I found out confirmably that it was not only true in the northern part of Florida, but the center part of Florida and also the southern part of Florida. And they knew that what they was doing was stealing the election by taking the Chads and throwing them off in the alligator slums and not counting them properly and all this other stuff. They knew. That was the turn right there that confirmed that the American people have taken the left turn versus the right turn. That was all a stem off from what went on in the later 80s of the Ronald Reagan administration, that, as far as I'm concerned, Mr. Bush, the only reason why that he was granted presidency was because he come in off the coattail of what Ronald Reagan had done. Why did Ronald Reagan succeed in what that he had done? Because of the testimony of the 9 tapes coming to the White House, because of God working in that administration's favor towards ending the Cold War. Now, I know whenever I say this stuff, a lot of people says, man, this guy, he's really flipped it, ain't he? He's really way out there in left field, isn't he? No, I'm not. I've been observing. I've been witnessing. I've been micromanaging all these things in my mind and in my heart. And in the meantime, I would stand up. Everybody would become frantic about my message towards me being the messenger, and they knock me down. I'd have to play dead man's bluff and act like, oh, please, please don't sick the dogs on me, master. Please, please don't sick the dogs on me, master. I won't do it again. And I'd lay down with my message. Then a few years later, I'd stand back up with my message. Things would get heated up in my life again. I'd have to basically play the same play. Playing dead man's bluff. Please don't sick the dogs on me, master. I won't do it again. And I had to do this routinely again and again and again throughout the 30-plus years of the life of the Windmill Ministries missions, just to be able to get where we are today. And it's only been because of social media platform that has given me a bigger voice, a louder voice, in being able to get my message out to the general public of me telling my story accurately, authentically, that I can prove of what has occurred with the lifespan of the Windmill Ministries missions. Because if it wasn't for God protecting me and being with me, I would have either done already probably committed suicide, or lost my mind, or given in to the temptations of these entrapments, kind of like what went on in my brother and I, in our lives during that 3-year span between 20 and 14 and 20 and 17 up until he died, to the degree of basically shooting myself in the foot. Or us. And at that time, it really wouldn't have mattered if they would have taken both of us down just to have gotten to me. But once more, they missed their target. Just like whenever the episode happened, whenever I was 14 years old and my older brother got killed in the center of Cydonia. They missed their target. They got the wrong brother. They knew that something had happened in my mother's life up in Antioch, Illinois, pertaining to her being given a premonition, a vision. They knew it. These evil demonic spirits knew it, and they especially knew it after my life had been spared in 1983, whenever a Buick Regal should have killed me. And that's whenever they started festering tooth and nail towards coming after me. And it didn't matter if they come after me through my dad. It didn't matter if they come after me through the Kentucky authorities. It didn't matter if they come after me through the Tennessee authorities. Or it didn't matter if they come at me through the Oklahoma authorities. They was dead set that they was fixing to end me. They wanted me shut up. They did not want this story told. Well, guess what? October, I think it's the 29th, maybe it's the 30th, I don't know, year 2023, I'm still alive. I'm still talking, and I'm still presenting my story, my case before the people. Now it's up to the people of how they respond to this story or to this case that I can authentically prove. And my son can verify that, and probably over half the people that lives in this particular area within a 5-county region can verify the same thing, because they know my life. Now the people in Kentucky knows my life. Now the people in Oklahoma knows my life. Now, because of social media, now there's people all over the world that are becoming familiar with my testimony and my life. So yes, I thank God every day that I'm still alive, though I go through pains and aches, though I've went through heartaches, though I've been ripped and torn, though I've been let down, though I've been backstabbed in the back, though the courts have not done what they were supposed to have done up here in Tennessee, or even Kentucky, or even Oklahoma. I can still, not frantically, but humbly, tell my story, tell my testimony, in how that I have been put out by various groups of people again and again and again, leading to where we are today. Leading to where we are today. Like I said, whenever I first stood out in 1989, going on a radio station up here in WENK in Union City, I was basically persecuted immediately by Mr. Wooten's nephew, working at the time in Dresden in a body shop, of having to make a decision of either getting off the radio station or seek employment elsewhere. And Lord God, did the churches ever rise up against this message then, just like they rose up against the message whenever I come back here and I was promoting my message out before the churches before COVID had hit. Just about the time before COVID hit, I was really putting out my messages, and some of them I was still doing it primitively, but this time rather than doing it with cassette tapes, I was doing it with DVDs, CDs, whatever. That has now led us to where we are today after COVID, after seeing what the oil petroleum companies have done to the world, after seeing what the Russian government has done to the Ukrainians, and now seeing what's going on in the Middle East. So the ball is still rolling. History is still being made. In the meantime, I'm still telling my story. Thank God that God was in my corner. Though nobody else was, thank God that God was in my corner, because I promise you, if he wasn't, I wouldn't be able, I wouldn't have the liberty or the freedom or even the life of me telling what I'm telling right now.
Ohio Republican Senator J.D. Vance joins us now in studio. Good morning, and good to have you here face to face. Senator, there is a lot I want to get to with you, but I want to start on one of the big themes we've been talking about, which is all the national security threats facing the United States right now. President Biden asked for $106 billion in aid from Congress. Ukraine, Israel, the border, and countering China. I'm surprised as a Republican that the issue you're talking the most about is not the U.S. border. Why?
Well, we care a lot about the border, of course, but what I'm saying is that we should divide the packages and actually have distinct debates on each one of these questions, especially the Israel issue, for a couple of reasons. First of all, Israel needs the aid, and they need it immediately. Second of all, there's broad bipartisan consensus that we should be supporting Israel. And third, and most importantly, we're stretched way too thin. The president's budget request betrays a fundamental misunderstanding, I think, of the challenges in the country. We cannot support a three-pronged conflict in the war. We don't make enough weapons. Our manufacturing capacity is too weak. We need to pick and choose. To pick and choose, Congress needs to have a real debate, not collapse these packages together and pretend we can do everything at once. We can't.
So you know what he just got through doing? He just got through advising our enemies all over the world in one of our weaknesses. Now they're going to listen to that and they're going to say, wow, that's coming from an American politician that's admitting to the Americans' weaknesses. Instead of them laying low, there's an old saying that my grandfather used to always say, that you hit the iron while the iron is hot. You hit the iron while the iron is hot. By people like that saying what he just got through saying on national TV. He just got through telling our enemies that if they all congregate doing a pile on at one time, we cannot handle all of these fires towards putting them out at the same time. So basically what he just got through doing is opening us up for more involvement with confrontations all over the world. Now, how smart is that? Looking at that from a military perspective, how smart is people that's going to open up and say such stuff like that. And it may be truthful and it may not be truthful, but how smart is that for somebody in his leadership role to get on TV and say that? From a military perspective, I would say that that wouldn't be all that smart. Because now you have exposed yourself to your enemies. And you have to admit, because we still put a label on our coattails, pottails, whatever you want to call it, of being a Christian nation, while all these other nations are not Christian nations, you have to admit, the bullseye has been on us for a long, long time. And the bullseye will continue to be on us, standing up as being a true, authentic Christian democracy nation. To me, I categorize something like this, the same thing that happened in 1995 after the Timothy McVeigh and Nichols thing happened out in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. It wasn't but a few days after that occurred, whenever they figured out what had happened. I said it was a few days, it may have been a few weeks, towards explaining to the public that it was basically somebody with ammonium nitrate fertilizer that created a bomb that killed 168 people that day. Wow. You just got through exposing to now other people that has similar motives on wanting to do similar things, of them doing the same. How stupid can that be, looking at it from a military perspective? It's stupid. It's absolutely stupid. You wonder how come we're failing? You wonder how come we're getting deeper and deeper into this? Quit wondering. Stop wondering.
So let's unpack some of what you said there, because you are talking about the exact same amount for Israel that President Biden is talking about. Sure. It's roughly $14 billion. But you've removed humanitarian assistance to Gaza. Leader McConnell was on this program last Sunday, and he supports the package. Here's what he said.
Well, we want to make sure we're not sending money to Hamas, I can tell you that. But there are genuine humanitarian needs for the people in Gaza who are not Hamas, who've been thrown under the bus by what Hamas did. Innocent people.
Half of the population of Gaza are children.
Sure.
Why don't you think the United States can do what Leader McConnell talked about there and provide aid to them?
Well, first, Leader McConnell is right, of course, that there are a lot of innocent people in Gaza. We certainly don't want to cause any harm to them. We also have to be, again, reasonable about what we can accomplish. Who delivers the humanitarian assistance? Fundamentally, Hamas is in control of the entire territory. So if you deliver a large amount of humanitarian assistance, who's it going to go to? The children in Gaza or to the Hamas fighters on the front line?
Well,
I fear it's going to go to Hamas.
The Red Cross, all the international organizations who have been there and administering and frankly stepping up because the government has failed the Palestinian people, in the words of a lot of analysts on both sides of the aisle.
Stepping up, but I think there's still a lot of evidence with a lot of these international organizations that when we send aid into Gaza, a lot of it goes into the wrong hands. And that's what those of us who are critical of the president's posture are really worrying about. We don't want to basically fund two sides of the exact same conflict. Fund Hamas, fund Israel. Seems like a really bad deal for American taxpayers. Most of all, it's just stupid.
Well, it's not aid to Hamas, it's aid to the Palestinian people.
Sure, and look,
a million of which are children.
And if I could wave a magic wand and give aid to the Palestinian children, I will. But given the realities on the ground, I think if we divert resources to Gaza, it's going to fall in the wrong hands.
So you don't trust any of the international organizations that are doing that right now?
I don't trust Hamas on the ground, and I certainly think the international organizations, look, some of them are good people, some of them actually have some compromised positions. We can't assume that just because it flows to an international organization, it's going to go to the kids and not to the fighters.
You've been very critical of President Biden's response to Iran and its proxy forces and the threats they pose to our troops.
Yeah.
So spin that forward for me. You're in the Senate. Would you authorize the use of force by the president against the state of Iran?
Well, right now, absolutely not. I think that we should be trying to de-escalate the situation. Of course, we need to have red lines, though. If the Iranians attack American troops, if they play an escalatory role,
multiple times.
If they play an escalatory role in the conflict, we need to be willing to respond. They have attacked. Certain militia groups have attacked, and I think we've done the right thing. A proportionate response. If they hit us, we have to hit them back. But if you're talking about an attack on the Iranian mainland, I think that would be a significant escalation. Right now, it would be a mistake.
So on the portion that you are supporting for aid to Israel, the Prime Minister said last night that this is going to be a long war, but you just heard Jake Sullivan, the National Security Advisor, say they still have to ask specific and hard questions of the Israeli leadership, like what exactly are you doing next? What is the end game here?
Sure.
Doesn't that trouble you? Because there are people who would say maybe there should be strings attached to some of this aid. Do you have an open checkbook for Israel?
Well, certainly it's a troubling situation. It's a troubling situation, of course, because 1,500 Israelis were slaughtered by Hamas. I think what we have to have is some respect for our allies. They're not asking us to send ground troops. All they're asking us really is for weapons. And we should have some respect for their strategic imperative and also the fact that they know what they're doing within their own country. The goal here is not to have an unlimited response here. The Israelis themselves, I think, have scoped the operation. They seem to be targeting a very narrow thing, which is degrading Hamas. I think we have to have some respect for our Israeli allies that they know what they're doing in their own country.
Well, they haven't explained it yet to the U.S. government, is what the National Security Advisor was saying there. So you were giving them the benefit there. I want to talk about one place you've been very clear that you aren't giving them the benefit of the doubt, and that is to Ukraine. We just heard the new House Speaker. You have some similarities with him in terms of separating out Israel aid from Ukraine aid. He did say, though, we can't allow Putin to prevail in Ukraine because I don't believe it would stop there. We're not going to abandon them. What part of that statement is objectionable to you?
Well, nothing is objectionable in the sense that if I could wave a magic wand and throw Putin out of Ukraine, I would. But what we have to accept is there's a difference between what should happen and what can happen. America has limited capacity. Just in the Israeli conflict, for example, there are 300,000 artillery shells the Israelis would love to have access to. They don't have access to them. Why? Because we sent them to Ukraine. We have a rising threat of China in East Asia. There are weapons the Taiwanese need that we can't send because we sent them to Ukraine.
So to your,
we have to focus. That's all I'm saying.
Well, on that portion of it, though, Leader McConnell spent a good amount of time talking about, of the $60 billion for Ukraine, it's actually kind of mislabeled because $45 billion of it is for some of this industrial policy, including artillery manufactured in Ohio.
Sure.
You've got a tank manufacturer in Ohio, a combat vehicle manufacturer there, General Dynamics. So are you against that if it benefits your state?
Well, look, I'm good for benefits of the state, but this particular policy, we have to be careful, Margaret. We have to remember that we cannot flip the switch and turn back on America's industrial might overnight. It takes years.
So you do want the investment in all that industrial buildup?
I want investment in the industrial buildup for America's national security interests, not to throw billions of dollars in Ukraine before that industrial buildup even happens.
So why not prioritize that first?
Well, we should. That's exactly my point.
Before
in fact, we should prioritize the buildup of America's industrial base, and we should devote it to our true allies like Israel.
All right. What he's talking about there is based upon supply and demand. In other words, once we identify that we're going to need all this, then is whenever we should make a demand towards producing all this. To me, that's bad leadership. Once you've realized that you have now exploited your resources, we should immediately open up places like Milan Arsenal or other places to be giving out signals to our enemies that, hey, we're preparing for the inedible. We're preparing for the worst of the worst that could possibly happen towards this pile-on, this global pile-on that looks like is occurring. So to me, sitting around waiting on the signals of supply and demand is the wrong imagery or the wrong stance to take whenever it comes to our national defense. Now, that's my opinion about it. You can take it for what it's worth, you know, but to get up on national TV and admit to all these things is a completely, total, different issue that once more opens up that many more opportunities towards our enemies scratching their heads and saying, wow, maybe this is the golden opportunity that we need to come after America and come after Israel and basically end this Christian culture up onto the planet completely and totally. It's really not about democracy and autocracy. It's about good and evil. And that was the very thing that the leader of Jerusalem said. It's about bad and good. It's about evil and good. It's not about democracy. You can paint it up and make it look like it's about democracy versus autocracy, but it's really about good and bad. And that's the things that I've been saying all along, and that's the reason why I've been trying to tell my fellow man, as well as my brothers and sisters in the Lord, that we're under a siege, we're under an invasion. It's a spiritual invasion, and if we don't properly prepare towards putting out the battle cry, we are going to suffer immensely. And if you think that we're suffering now, you haven't seen suffering. I'm telling you, you have not seen suffering, because the war could actually come in our own neighborhoods, in our own backyards, and in ways it already has, pertaining to all the gun violence and all the mass shootings and all the drugs and all the gang violence and all the illegal immigrants coming over here and us being $30-something trillion in debt. The battle has already come here. But people ain't looking at it that way, because they're saying, oh, we pay these people the money that we pay them. They're the ones in charge, and they're handling things adequately. Are they? Are they really handling our national security interest adequately?
And of course, the rising threat in East Asia. My whole point here is that even if we strike to rebuild the industrial might of this country, we don't have enough capacity to support a three-front war. We've got to focus, and I think we should be focusing on Israel and Taiwan.
Senator, more to talk about with you, but we have to take a break, sure. So I have to leave it there. We'll be right back.
My name is...
Wow, I can't believe that they discuss some of the things they discuss on national TV like this. I really can't.
2014, the Israeli army...
Let's back up a little bit. Right there.
How you would describe what's happening now versus past conflict in Gaza?
Well, I have been covering the conflict since 1988, but till now, but I have never saw...
1988. Does that number ring a bell? I've never heard this before. This is all new to me. But does the year 1988 not ring a bell whenever I talk about 1988, the latter part of Ronald Reagan's administration, again and again and again?
So...
Let's back it up. Let's be sure we listen to all of it here.
Conflict in Gaza.
Well, I have been covering the conflict since 1988, but till now, but I have never saw or covered such as this war. It's horrible. Before this war, I mean, about the war in 2014, the Israeli army used to send message warning to the people to leave the house before they destroy it. Now they don't send any warning. Just suddenly they strike the house, killing all of the people inside. So this is different, completely different of any other war before in Gaza Strip.
Marwan Al-Ghul, CBS producer living in Gaza. Marwan, please stay safe. Please keep your family safe.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And we'll be right back.
We're near the Israel-Gaza border.
In Gaza, our CBS News team witnessed the immediate aftermath.
Our correspondents are following all aspects of this conflict.
The Israel-Hamas war. Stay with CBS News for continuing coverage on CBS and streaming on Paramount+.
CBS News. I'm telling you, it's all lining up with the Bible of what Christ said, that in the last days we would see things such as we've never seen or heard before on the planet, and that Satan will come down. That means he'll come down from the sky in great wrath, because he knows, or it knows,
Cross, and he joins us from Geneva.
that its days
Good
is
morning.
that its days is short. That its days is short. And I've been trying to tell people this now for 30-something years, trying to properly prepare them for this moment. And as far as I'm concerned, I'm still getting blowed off. Now, that's the way that I see it. And I really, truly believe that that's the only way that anybody else would see it, if they had dedicated as much time and interest and fortitude as I had. If they had went through the things that I went through, that they would have the very exact same opinion that I have about all this. What's the old saying? You can lead a horse to the water trough, but you can't make him drink. There you go, Tony Smith. You didn't want this to be crammed down your throat. 20-something years ago, whenever I was working for your daddy from 1991 to 1995. So I hope now that you and people like you can understand the decisions that y'all made back then have brought the consequences into all of our lives today. Now what's fixing to be crammed down all of our throats? That's the next $64,000 question. Are we going to have to worry about war right here on our own country, in our own backyard? And in essence, we already are at war. Whenever it gets to the point that you're not safe to go to a bowling alley, or a ball game, or a theater, or a church, or an event like out in Las Vegas, or go to a bar like down in Orlando, Florida, or go to school, you, my friends, are at war. You may not want to classify it as war, but in actuality, war has already struck in our streets right here in America. What other way can you categorize it?
Sir, how much aid have you been able to get into Gaza today?
Good morning, Margaret. So today we were...
Once more, I'm going to tell my viewers, this is going to be the human, sad story about all of this, in which it is a sad story. And from a humanitarian standpoint, I'm sure what you're going to talk about, because I don't even know, I hadn't heard it yet, it's going to be probably true. But once more, you have to look at the facts. And looking at the lesser of the two evils, who was the one that struck the first blow?
To get 3 additional trucks in of medicines, war-wounded kits, so surgical equipment for hospital. They are badly needed, as well as some water and sanitation equipment. They come on top of 6 trucks that passed on Friday. This is good, this is positive, but this is a drop in an ocean of need. And of course, is only a small fraction of what the Gaza Strip and Gazans need today.
We just heard on our program from a Republican senator.
War has never been a glorious thing. Confrontation has never been good. And that's exactly how our legal system is structuralized. It's structuralized around confrontation. It's structuralized around people having conflict. That's the reason why one of the things that I say about the Catholic Church that I admire, not the Roman Catholic Church, but the Catholic Church, that whenever 2 people, married or just living together or whatever, has a conflict, they can take their conflict before the minister, the priest, and they will ordinarily work out the wrinkles before it ever reaches the level of going into the hands of the actual wolves. Because it's the wolves, the system, that feeds off of people's conflicts. That's the reason why people go to jail. That's the reason why you have lawyers. That's the reason why we got judges. That's the reason why we have courts. It's all based around people's hard times, people's difficult moments. So whenever Donald Trump and people like Donald Trump says that the system needs to be drained, the swamp needs to be drained, that's what he's talking about. You're feeding, you're preying off of the disbenefits of we the people. It would be the same difference if you went down to the Gulf after a major hurricane went down there and you started selling bags of ice for $20 a bag, gouging the people, taking advantage of that particular situation. It's on the same level of how that our court structure is set up here, rather than you trying to reprimand people in conforming them. Now you turn it into a money game to where now justice has turned into nothing but who's got the biggest pockets, who's got the deepest pockets, who can pay the most money. And that is not what our ancestors intended for our system to turn out to be. It's become corrupt in that aspect because it preys on difficult problems. It preys on people's controversial problems. It's really sad in how come we have driven ourselves off into this corner, and now I don't know that we can straighten it out. It's definitely going to take the power of God to straighten it out, just like Billy Graham's son, Franklin Graham, says that the only thing that's going to be able to save this planet is going to be God.
From a Republican senator who said that he does not trust that U.S. aid that is provided to international organizations like yours can actually make it to the people of Gaza and not end up in the hands of terrorists. How do you account for that?
Well, as a neutral, impartial humanitarian organization that has been present in the Gaza Strip for decades now, we work in a direct implementation mode. We have our own staff delivering aid and services to individuals that are carefully vetted, to institutions such as hospitals, such as the Shifa Hospital, where our surgeon very often operate hand in hand with the Palestinian surgeons and our partners from the Palestine Red Crescent Society. So we have very robust and rigorous checks in place to prevent and to ensure rather that the aid goes to the right persons, those who need it the most.
Good luck.
This
Good
morning,
luck
the Palestinian Red Crescent that you just mentioned said they received threats and needed to evacuate the hospital, they were told, because it was going to be bombarded. Did Israel inform your partners of this? What is happening?
Well, these orders of evacuation happening in the Gaza Strip are, of course, problematic for us. This hospital, Al-Quds, has close to 400 patients, most of them severely injured. There are thousands of civilians taking shelter in hospitals. Hospitals are protected by the laws of war, by international humanitarian law. Under no circumstances, hospitals should be bombed. Under no circumstance, a patient should die in a hospital bed, and it is very difficult to evacuate hospitals. Imagine babies in incubators. You cannot unplug this. Imagine people getting oxygen. You cannot just evacuate this unless there is a feasible and viable alternative to this. And today, this alternative simply does not exist in the Gaza Strip. And let's remind that it is the obligation of parties to the conflict to ensure that basic services for the civilian population are covered at all times. And the burden should not go to organizations such as us or the Palestine Red Crescent Society.
You are neutral. You are in contact with Hamas. On Friday, there had been high hopes for a humanitarian hostage release. There wasn't one. Do you still believe that one is possible?
Let me just start by saying that to the families of hostages, that the plight of their loved ones is one of our top priorities, that we are in conversation with Hamas, with Israeli officials, and with others to ensure their safe release. We have been also proposing to visit hostages in order to ensure that they get personal medicines, or simply that they can exchange messages with their loved ones. And of course, we stand ready to facilitate any release, hoping that this will happen. So far, we were able to facilitate the release of 4 hostages, and we stand ready to do more as soon as parties negotiate an agreement.
Well, we hope for all of those hostage families that there is one. Thank you very much for your time today. We'll be right back.
We do hope. But at the same time, you got to be practical about your hopes and understanding the odds of those people coming back alive is going to be like slim to none.
Week, we asked our Holly Williams to reflect on the magnitude of the story and how the unimaginable is now reality.
At first, the scale of the attack on October 7th was difficult to grasp for Israelis and for us.
This attack is being compared to Israel's 9/11.
Israel didn't see the massacre coming. Civilians hunted in their own homes, and nor did we.
How long were they planning this for?
They must have been planning this for at least a year, if not longer. Well trained. They knew how to use these weapons. They were applied correctly, which is why there was so much carnage. They knew what they were doing.
For many Israelis, it brought back nightmarish echoes of the Holocaust.
This is Almog. Look at his smile.
Orit Meir's son Almog is believed to be one of the hostages, shown here in a Hamas propaganda video.
I recognize him from the beginning.
And how did you feel at that moment?
Terrified.
Israel and the Palestinians have been locked in a cycle of violence for decades.
Hamas will understand that by attacking us, they've made a mistake of historic proportions.
3 days after the assault, with Israeli airstrikes raining down on Gaza and Palestinians paying for Hamas's actions with their lives, the militants threatened to start killing the hostages one by one every time Israel bombed Palestinian civilians without warning. We held our breath, so did Israel, but instead Hamas began to release some of the hostages. Around 200 are still pawns in a high-stakes game of blackmail. Reporting from southern Israel when the country's at war means seeking cover whenever Hamas fires rockets.
We just heard a whole series of very large blasts, and we ran to take cover here.
But Israelis are protected from most of the barrages by the Iron Dome air defense system. Inside the Gaza Strip, there is no protection.
I saw dozens of killed people and...
Our colleague, CBS News producer Marwan Al-Ghul, lives there with his family, risking his life to get the news out. Marwan has enriched our reporting for over 2 decades. And when we visited Gaza, he's helped keep us safe.
I am concerned of my family. This makes me sometimes angry, and sometimes I feel like I need to cry.
Pain is what the Israelis and Palestinians share. War and politics are what divide them.
That was our Holly Williams. Thank you, and thank you all for watching. Until next week. For Face the Nation, I'm Margaret Brennan.
Now I want to say this. The word come up, terrified. How did the people feel? They felt terrified because they hadn't received that type of pain and agony coming from their enemies. And it caught them in such of a surprise that they was terrified. And I think anybody that's got any kind of sense at all would look at that situation and say, well, you know what? We really don't blame them poor people for feeling terrified. Because if it was our communities, if it was our country, if it was our nation that was being attacked that way, we'd feel the same way. We'd feel terrified. Okay? Now, picture my brother, going back to my story, living here all of our lives, knowing what we know about previous ancestors in regards towards how they felt, and even though they may have done what they done in response to the way that they done it, you can be sincere, but at the same time sincerely wrong. And I'm talking about Jeff Jackson, that hung so many people down here at the store that they started calling it Limb Store. Basically working for the state of Tennessee in the early 1900s. This was before the laws got conformed over here in America, because up until then, that was basically the way that they handled things. They didn't have appeals. You didn't go to court, have basically, I mean, they was starting to have juries where instead of the decision being a one-man's decision, it now was being more than one person's decision. They was already exploiting into those areas, but our laws actually didn't become conformed over here until after World War I, and it took a while for that to get into the urban areas. It took about 15, 20 years before it finally started sinking in. Well, that's not the proper way of doing things. We're going to start doing things this way. Well, my great-grandfather and his wife that had a store here, they was a merchant here in this area that helped build this community. They was still in that transformation stage to the point that they was still doing things according to their ancestors appropriately. But at the same time, they was doing it wrong as far as the way that they was handling those particular situations. Us knowing about our ancestors, being raised up here all our lives, and all of a sudden the courts letting us down and being attacked by various community people here in this area. Not one or two families, but probably a dozen or more families that was demonstrating their hate and dislike about me coming back here. My brother was terrified. He was absolutely terrified in seeing how that he was let down by not only his own peers, but the law that was supposed to be here to protect him. And to have somebody like Johnson look at me and David and telling David, I'll support you, but your brother Juby, I'm not supporting him. That right there is bias, prejudice, and as far as I'm concerned, people like that does not need to hold positions that they hold today in the administration of the law. And as far as Tommy Moore letting David down, it was only because David, making the decision that David made into the process of all this, whenever they decided to come and basically attack me and charge me for stalking, it was my brother David that said, Juby, you don't need to take this to lower court. You need to take it to higher court. We knew that it was going to cost more, but we was willing to pay that differences between Tommy Moore's decision that we know was going to be biased versus the higher court. And in between that is whenever my brother died, and in between that is whenever I basically throw up my hands and said, okay, I'll agree. I'll do the dead man's bluff again. What do you want me to do? What do you want me to do? Well, we want you to plead guilty to stalking, and because you already had a stalking charge up in Kentucky, Mr. Jackson, we're going to consider you a multiple offender, and because of it, it reaches the level of a felony, a class E felony. Okay, that's what you want to do. If that's what it's going to take for me to get out of jail. I've done been in here now about 35 days, 36 days. Let's do it. At my age, after what that I had already went through, because of the White House right there, I really didn't have no other choice unless I wanted to live out the rest of my life in fighting the courts up in Tennessee, the same way that I would basically have been forced to have done in Trigg County, Kentucky, even though I was being held in Christian County, Kentucky, because they didn't have a jail. If I would have fought them people, I guess I would have fought them until the very ending of the 10-year span, because they was going to charge me per telephone call 1 to 5 years, even though each telephone call was not a threatening telephone call. How much more can an individual be threatened that way again and again and again all throughout my life? And my brother knew all this. That's the reason why my brother was terrified. He was absolutely terrified because of the disturbances that was going on here with certain family members in this area, that I would call my brother while he was at work, and I'd tell David, you better get your piece out, man. They liable to wind up, liable to be some sort of a trap between here and Kenton down in the bottom somewhere. They liable to stop you and try to take care of business. Because I know the evil that was coming, that was lurking right here up onto our property. I was concerned. David was terrified. David knew the reason why that they was attacking him was because of me. And to give you an illustration of how hideous, how insane that all this was, to think that whenever my brother did die, rather than getting any type of remorse, rather than getting any type of grief from various community leaders around here, I was having people stop out here and accusing me of my own brother's death. Accusing me of being a pedophile. Accusing me of having sex with my brother. How cold and callous can a community be that wants to bring this type of torture, and that's the only word that I know to put it at, torture to an individual's life, especially after him just get through losing his brother because of all the confrontation and because of the way that the courts dropped the ball and let us fall through the cracks because they did not understand. But I do think that some of them did. The reason why Juby ever went out west to discover the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth about the cover-up that happened not only in Waco, Texas, but also in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, tying both incidences together. They did not understand or comprehend my motives of why I had to go out there to begin with. They was already picking and pawing and gnawing over here on this end in Northwest Tennessee and Martin, Tennessee, towards trying to prove me as being some sort of a homegrown terrorist by putting charges on my life towards falsifying files. That has strong indications of somebody having the potential of being a homegrown terrorist, such as somebody crying fire in the middle of a theater and there is no fire, or pulling down a fire alarm. So they was already itching in 2005 by me passing out Bible literature pertaining to the same message. Message hadn't changed coming from the messenger. But it was a way that they was attacking me towards no longer attacking me in the area towards me being somebody that was mentally incompetent. But now, after 9/11, they was approaching me of me being a harm or a threat to my own people in my own state, in my own country. Now, whenever I discuss and talk about monsters, we're not just talking about bad people, but we're talking about consciously people knowing that they have stepped over the line in being cruel, in being cold, in being callous. And you wonder how come my brother's life was terrified? Horrified? Especially after him living here all his natural born life. David wasn't like me. David has lived here basically all his life. I think there was one time that my brother went to Paducah, Kentucky, and he went to some sort of a college or something up there. I don't know exactly the name of the college, but he'd done something up there, and he was gone for like maybe 6 months or a year. But he was still within the same area. He could still drive back and forth down into this area. Paducah, Kentucky, from where I live here, ain't but about an hour drive. He's not like me. I've lived in Florida 3 or 4 different times. Been in and out of Florida over a dozen times. I've lived in all these other states. I never become an actual citizen of that state. But I have lived there, some of these places, as much as a year almost. Like down in Gulfport, Mississippi, whenever I went down there with Katrina damage that hit in 2005. I went up there in 2006, January 2006. I stayed down there long enough that I was actually changing over my paperwork pertaining to my truck title and everything, being registered as a Mississippian versus a Tennessean. After I realized that that's not what God wanted me to do, I retransferred all my material over. It took a while for me to do it, but I finally got all my material transferred back over towards me being a Tennessean in the aspect of me being registered as a Tennessean pertaining to my title, being registered still in the state of Tennessee. It took a while for me to do that, but like I said, I stayed down there for almost a year. All these other places that I stayed at, some places no longer than 3 months, some places as long as 6 months, I never changed my identity towards being a Tennessee resident. I maintained a Tennessee driver's license status the whole time. The whole time. And you can look at my driving record in my performances that should speak some sort of volume about my abilities towards me not getting a whole bunch of tickets during the span of about a 20-year period. I'm not saying that I didn't get a ticket. One of the first places that I got a ticket once I come back here was in Obion County, state of Tennessee. I worked it out with the Tennessee administration towards going to school, towards it not showing up on my record. I did get a speeding ticket. I didn't want it. I didn't think that I was speeding. I think that either the person that gave me the ticket was bogus, or the material that they was using, their equipment was bogus. But I went ahead and paid the ticket. And I went ahead and went to school. So yes, I got a speeding ticket. Does that make me a criminal? Does that make me a monster? No. It makes me somebody that was in a hurry, that wasn't paying attention to what I was doing, to the point that I got a speeding ticket. I think that just about any citizen in America can probably say the same thing if they've ever been a driver at one time or another in their lives. So who was the monsters? And who today still is the monsters? Beginning at the White House. Beginning at the White House. Towards what they tried to do in pulling the wool over the American people's eyes in how Ronald Reagan ever accomplished what the Reagan administration accomplished during the latter part of the Reagan administration. You wonder how come Ronald Reagan all of a sudden got dementia? And all of a sudden Nancy Reagan was the one that was actually running the White House at the time? And they was basically using Ronald Reagan the last year of his presidency towards basically being an obstacle kind of like a figurine that you'd put on a shelf somewhere to look at. He wasn't making those decisions. Something had happened to Ronald Reagan. I personally believe that it could have been from within, because I personally believe that Ronald Reagan wanted to expose the whole truth, nothing but the truth, to the American people. But somebody within his branch, somebody within his circle, somebody within his cabinet members said, don't you do that. We're not going to expose this individual, that even though he's the guy with the message, towards him being the messenger, you just throw all that away and just act like none of that happened. I personally believe that he could have been sabotaged. He could have been given something to have caused him to have become dementia. I can't prove that, but that's just a suspicion that I have about the latter part of Ronald Reagan's administration, especially if you get to understanding what actually occurred in his abilities to be able to govern. And most people don't know that it was Nancy Reagan that was making the calls in who turned the lights on versus who turned the lights off during the latter part of Ronald Reagan's administration. And as far as I'm concerned, the Bushes never, ever should have come in contact in becoming eligibility for the presidency, regardless whether it was Bush Sr. or Bush Jr. And to think that it was on Bush Jr.'s watch, after Bush Sr. done what Bush Sr. done over in the Middle East, when we was attacked by 9/11. The dots line up. And now if you really want to stretch the dots out even further, go back to the assassination of JFK. Who was working for the Homeland Security Secret Service at the time whenever JFK got assassinated? Old man Bush. Senior Bush was working for Secret Service. You see where they kick the door open, and they may not get it open all the way. They may just get their foot through the door, but they get it in the door enough that they start manipulating. They start working. They start going up the political ladder. And these people that have done this, that have put us where we are today, has still not been accountable for their actions towards where we are today. To where if some of these other countries, if this would have went on in some of these other countries that have done already, went and killed the person that done that, they'd have probably killed the family and probably done burn them out. They would have done executed them and taken everything that they ever had and drained their bank accounts and etc. Do I see anybody doing that to any of the Bush administration people pertaining to their cabinet members down in Texas? Nope. And you won't see it. You know why? Because our laws have said, well, that's not proper. That's not the way that the American laws are supposed to handle things. Well, how come our laws don't handle things properly the way that other countries do whenever something like this occurs? Because to this day, the administration that's in power right now pertaining to Biden is suffering the recourses of what other administrations have done in front of them and because of them. Now, if you're not intelligent enough to be able to put all those dots together in the same sequence, then obviously I'm talking to somebody that is incapable of stretching this out to a 30-plus year span. And if you really want to get technical about it, in my particular life, it would be a 40-year span, beginning with a telephone call to the White House in 1983 over in Kenton, Tennessee. And then if you really want to span the dots out, go all the way back to the assassination of JFK. There was a movement within our own government to bring us where we are today. And it was not done ignorantly. It was not done unintentionally. It was actually done intentionally. Now, whether or not people listen to this and watch this and believe this or not, that will be up to them. But as of right now, October, whatever day it is, 29th, 30th, whatever, I have no other reason to believe the things that I'm talking about because of what I know, what I have been exposed to, and what I have seen within the span of my lifetime. I don't remember, per se, the JFK assassination. I was up in Round Lake, Illinois at the time. I think I was 2 years old, 2 or 3. I remember a lot of the headlines on the news about that. After I become a little older, the main thing that I remember in my younger life, going all the way back after me being a toddler, was all the scenes, all the bloody, gory scenes that I seen on TV pertaining to Vietnam. And those was the scenes that turned the American people against that war. That was the reason why, due to media, due to TV, of the reason why that them men and women was coming off the airplanes and people was spitting on them. They was degrading them because of the things that they was witnessing and seeing on TV. Once more, there's nothing glamorous or glorious about war. But look what compromising and the media has done throughout the years of where we are today. And if the American people, especially the Christian American people, don't see that, it's because they either don't want to see it or they're incapable of seeing it. I want to thank you for listening. Good luck to each and every one of us as we struggle in the moments that we're in right now towards not only the gun violence, as you can see right there at the top of the White House, the American flag being draped halfway because of the senseless shootings that continually keep happening here again and again and again in America. As far as I'm concerned, though they haven't declared it as an actual war on the pretense of a civil war, in essence, that's exactly what we're in. And if we're not in war directly in the White House pertaining to the Speaker of the House, we're in war in other areas towards us being stretched too thin, or we're at war towards seeing our grandchildren being taken over by a drug-induced drug dealer or somebody on drugs real bad to the point that she has a child, which would be our grandchild or a great-grandchild, that now we realize that this child is messed up. This child is hooked on heroin because the mother was on heroin or the father was on heroin or meth or crack or cocaine or whatever. We have been infiltrated from the inside. We have been sabotaged from the inside. Just as President Lincoln said that no country can abolish us, but we can abolish ourselves. We can destroy ourselves from within. And that's exactly the trajectory that we're on right now until we open up our eyes and hold certain people accountable for their actions. And if there's anything wrong with me saying that, then I guess that I shouldn't even claim to be an American patriot. But I can tell you for a fact that I can prove that ever since I stepped out and made a telephone call to that bunch of people in 1983, whenever I was about 24 years old, my life has erratically been turned upside down. God bless America. God bless our troops. And God bless the decency of the people that knows the difference between good and bad and right and wrong. God bless those pertaining to Jerusalem. May God have mercy on the innocent. Because anytime there is a confrontation such as this, especially war, there's always going to be collateral damage. God have mercy on the people over in Ukraine and all the other people right now that are going through the situations that they're going through all over each and every continent. Because I promise you right now, evil is dispersing more so today than what it ever has. In ending of what I want to say, I looked up some of the crime organizations of the world, and I could not believe that the crime syndicate in the lower part of South America was as raw and as rank and as bad as what it is today. The citizens in America needs to understand that not everybody in South America or Mexico is bad people. The good people and the people that are wise to understand what's going on towards the wicked, turning against the wicked, are trying to get out of that area. And that's one of the reasons why that we are seeing what we're seeing towards the sudden surge of migration of people trying to come out of those situations. The only problem is so many of those people that's coming over the border have been planted now by Al-Qaeda, by Taliban, by other type of extremists that are now coming to America in the back door. And there ain't no telling how many sleeper cells that we have right now, regardless whether it be in Flint, Michigan, or out in California, or wherever, that are just waiting for the right moment to basically siege the American people and siege the American people's way. Our way of life, my friends, are at stake. It's not just democracy that's at stake. It's our whole way of life that is at stake. And as far as I'm concerned, beginning at Homeland Security, at Secret Service, at the White House, needs to be held accountable for their actions of why that they have allowed for this to fester and to get in the shape that they're in. And if we, the people, don't stand up against these aggressions, against these atrocities, all we're going to see is more chaos, and we're only going to get deeper and deeper in the hole, and we're only going to see more mass shootings, and we're only going to see more heartache and bad stuff that's going to happen in our communities, to the point that we're going to dwindle and hurt and dwindle and hurt just like a wounded animal, to the point if we take on enough pot shots from so many different enemies all over the world, eventually they will take us down. And instead of that flag only flying halfway down the pole, it will go completely down the pole, and then there'll be another regime that will take over our lives over here, and then we'll be under some sort of world dictator or some sort of communist control regime, because now they will infiltrate us from the inside out, being $33 trillion in debt. I don't think it can get much sadder than that, especially me knowing the sacrifices that my own people in my own region, my own bloodline, sacrificed so dearly for, that one of my great grandfathers took on artillery combat shot during the Civil War down in Pickwick, that used to be a cook for that division. God bless America. God bless our troops. And may heaven help us all in the era that we are in right now, towards us facing what we're facing. In Jesus' name, shalom.